You are standing on top of a tank that is on fire. The steel beneath your boots is burning, the machine is full of fuel and ammunition, and it could blow apart under you at any second. Snow is falling on a frozen field in eastern France. In front of you, coming through the white haze, are 6 enemy tanks and hundreds of enemy soldiers, and behind you is almost no one, because you ordered the last of your men to fall back into the trees to save their lives. You are alone. You have a machine gun, a field telephone pressed to your ear to call down artillery, and a wound in your leg that is soaking your trousers red. You are 19 years old. You are small, so small the Marines turned you away for being too skinny to fight. And in the next hour, on top of this burning tank, you are going to hold off an entire German assault by yourself. Your name is Audie Murphy, and you are about to become the most decorated American soldier of the Second World War. To understand how a boy this small ended up on top of a burning tank facing an army, you have to go back to where he started, because almost nothing about Audie Murphy's beginnings suggested a hero. He was born in 1925 in rural Texas, into crushing poverty, one of many children in a sharecropping family. A sharecropper farmed another man's land for a share of the crop, which usually meant a life of endless work and endless debt. His father abandoned the family. His mother, worn down by hardship, died while Audie was still a teenager. With the family falling apart, young Audie left school in the 5th grade to pick cotton in the fields and hunt small game to put food on the table for his younger brothers and sisters. And it was that hunting, out of pure necessity, that quietly forged the first piece of the legend. When every bullet costs money you do not have, and a missed shot means your family goes hungry, you learn to make every single shot count. By the time he was a teenager, Audie Murphy could shoot. Have you ever noticed how the hardest childhoods sometimes build the most unexpected skills? Then came the 7th of December, 1941, and the attack on Pearl Harbor. Like millions of young Americans, Audie wanted to fight. There was just one problem. Nobody wanted him. He was only 16, underage, and he looked even younger, a baby-faced boy standing around 5'5" and weighing barely 110 pounds. He went to the Marines. They turned him away as too small. He tried the Navy, rejected. He tried the paratroopers, rejected again. It was only after his sister helped him with paperwork that made him appear old enough, and after he had put on a little weight, that the Army finally, reluctantly, took him in 1942. Even in basic training, he did not impress anyone. He was so slight and so young-looking that his fellow recruits nicknamed him Baby, and during one drill he passed out cold from the heat. An officer looked at this small, fainting boy and decided he was not soldier material and suggested he be sent to cook and clean rather than fight, and Audie refused. He had not begged his way into this war to peel potatoes. He wanted a rifle. What he could not have known was that this skinny, underestimated teenager was about to walk through some of the most brutal fighting of the entire war. And walk through it he did. Audie Murphy was assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division, and over the next 2.5 years he would fight in one grinding campaign after another. He landed in North Africa, then fought his way through the invasion of Sicily. He fought up the bloody Italian peninsula, through places like Salerno and the murderous beachhead at Anzio, where soldiers were pinned down for months under constant fire. Then came the invasion of southern France, and the long, cold push toward Germany itself. This was not one heroic afternoon. This was campaign after campaign, month after month, of the kind of infantry combat that kills men by the thousands and wears down the survivors until they are strangers to themselves. Murphy was wounded more than once. He watched close friends die beside him. And through it all, something remarkable was happening. This small, quiet boy was turning out to be one of the finest combat soldiers anyone had ever seen. There is one earlier action worth pausing on, because it shows the pattern that would define him. During the fighting in France, Murphy's best friend in the company, a soldier he was close to, was shot and killed by German troops who used a fake surrender to lure him into the open. Something in Murphy went cold and quiet. He single-handedly assaulted the enemy position that had done it, wiping it out, and then turned the captured German machine gun on other nearby positions. Grief, in Audie Murphy, did not look like collapse. It looked like a terrible, controlled fury. That combination of deep feeling and ice-cold execution was the engine underneath everything he did. He had a gift that is very hard to explain to anyone who has not been shot at. In the chaos and terror of battle, when most men freeze or panic, Audie Murphy became calm, focused, and deadly. He seemed to think clearly precisely when thinking was hardest. Again and again, he did things that should have gotten him killed. He crawled forward alone to knock out enemy machine gun nests. He led attacks. He held positions that should have been overrun. He rose steadily through the ranks, from a lowly private to a sergeant, and eventually he was given what the Army calls a battlefield commission, promoted to officer, to second lieutenant, not because of schooling or connections, but purely because of what he had proven under fire. His men would follow him anywhere, because they had seen, over and over, that he would never ask them to go somewhere he would not go first. But all of it, every medal and every close call, was leading toward a single frozen day that would make him a legend. It was the 26th of January, 1945. The place was a snow-covered field near a village called Holtzwihr in the Colmar Pocket, one of the last German strongholds in France. Audie Murphy, now a second lieutenant, was in command of what was left of his company, and that is the first thing you have to understand about that day. His company was supposed to have well over 100 men. It had been ground down to fewer than 20. 19 exhausted, freezing soldiers, holding a position in the woods at the edge of that white field. And then the Germans came. Not a patrol, not a probe, a full assault, with 6 tanks and around 250 infantry, rolling straight toward Murphy's tiny, battered command. 19 men against an army. What would you do? What Murphy did first was the decision of a leader, not a daredevil. He knew his handful of men could not stop that force in the open, and he knew that if they tried, they would simply die for nothing. So he ordered them to fall back, to withdraw into the cover of the woods behind them and take up prepared positions. But he himself did not go. Murphy stayed forward at his command post, alone, and got on his field telephone, a wired phone used to talk to the artillery batteries far behind the lines. From that exposed spot, with enemy tanks and infantry closing in, he began calling down American artillery fire on the advancing Germans, reading out their positions and adjusting the shells as they fell closer and closer. It was the coldest kind of courage there is, standing still and doing careful math while an army walks toward you. Then things got worse, and out of that worse came the moment history remembers. Near his position sat an American M10 tank destroyer, a tracked armored vehicle built to hunt tanks, mounted with a big gun and, on top, a heavy .50 caliber machine gun. The .50 caliber is a fearsome weapon, its bullets large enough to tear a man apart and punch through walls and light vehicles. But this tank destroyer had been hit, its crew was gone, and the vehicle was burning, smoke pouring off it, its onboard ammunition and fuel making it a bomb waiting to explode. Any sane soldier would run away from a burning armored vehicle as fast as his legs would carry him. Audie Murphy climbed on top of it. Picture it, because this is the image that would be told and retold for the rest of the century. A single small soldier, wounded in the leg, standing on the deck of a burning tank destroyer in a snowy field. He grabbed the .50 caliber machine gun and turned it on the advancing German infantry, and he did not stop. For nearly an hour, Audie Murphy stood on that burning wreck and fired, swinging the heavy gun back and forth, cutting down the German soldiers as they came at him through the snow. He was wounded, he was exposed to enemy fire from 3 sides, and beneath his feet the tank destroyer smoldered and could have detonated at any moment. The Germans could not understand where the fire was coming from, or how one position could be putting out so much of it. All the while, unbelievably, Murphy kept the field telephone going, still calling in artillery on the enemy, even as he fired the machine gun. There is a famous exchange, passed down from that day, where the artillery officer on the phone asked how close the Germans were to his position, and Murphy is said to have answered, "Hold the line, and I will let you talk to one of them." Where does a 19-year-old find that kind of nerve, alone, on fire, facing an army? By the time it was over, Audie Murphy, by himself, on that burning tank destroyer, had killed or wounded around 50 German soldiers and, together with the artillery he directed, had broken the entire enemy assault. The attack that should have wiped out his tiny company was stopped cold. And then, still refusing to quit, wounded and out of ammunition, he climbed down and organized his men for a counterattack, pushing the Germans back. Only afterward did he allow his leg wound to be treated. For this single action, Audie Murphy was awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration the United States can give. But the Medal of Honor was only the crown on top of a mountain. Over the course of the war, this one small man received a staggering array of decorations, by the most common count around 33 awards in total, including not just the Medal of Honor, but the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and a string of others, along with medals from France and Belgium. He had earned, at one time or another, virtually every award for valor the United States Army had to offer. He was, by the end, the most decorated American combat soldier of the Second World War, and he was still not yet 21. Now here is the part of the story that matters most, the part that turns a war legend into a human being. Because you might imagine that a man who did all this came home to a simple happy ending. He did not. Audie Murphy came home a national hero. His face was on the cover of Life magazine. Hollywood came calling, and in one of the strangest twists in the history of fame, this poor Texas farm boy became a movie star. He appeared in around 40 films, mostly westerns, over the following decades, and in 1955, he did something almost no one has ever done. He starred as himself in a film called To Hell and Back, based on his own best-selling memoir of the same name, playing out his own war on the screen. The movie was one of the biggest hits his studio had ever released, a record breaker that stood for years. The boy the Marines rejected was now, impossibly, a wealthy and famous man playing himself in the story of his own heroism. And yet there is something quietly telling in how he handled that fame. When it came time to film the movie's climactic scene, the moment on the burning tank destroyer, Murphy reportedly asked that his own heroics be toned down, worried that audiences would not believe what had really happened, or perhaps simply uncomfortable seeing it played back. He gave away medals and money to fellow veterans and their families. The man the country wanted to treat as a superhero seemed to spend much of his life gently insisting that he was only a soldier who had done his job, and that the real heroes were the ones who never came home. But behind the fame, Audie Murphy was fighting a different war, one that never ended, and one that in his time had no real name. Today we would call it post-traumatic stress disorder. Back then they called it battle fatigue, or shell shock, and they barely understood it at all. Murphy suffered terribly. He had nightmares and could not sleep. For years he slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow, because after everything he had seen, he could never quite feel safe. He battled depression and dependence on sleeping pills. The calm, deadly focus that had made him a hero in combat had a shadow side, and it haunted him in peacetime for the rest of his life. And here Audie Murphy did something almost as brave as anything he did on that burning tank. At a time when soldiers were expected to simply be silent and tough, he spoke publicly about his own struggles. He called on his government to pay attention to the mental and emotional wounds that combat veterans carried home. He put his own famous name behind the idea that the damage of war does not end when the shooting stops. In doing so, he helped, in a small but real way, to open a conversation that would take decades more to mature. Is it possible that speaking honestly about his pain was the most heroic thing he ever did? His story did not end quietly either. In 1971, at the age of just 45, Audie Murphy was killed in a plane crash in bad weather in the mountains of Virginia. The boy who had survived some of the deadliest battles of the 20th century, who had stood on a burning tank and faced down an army, died not in war, but in a small private plane on a foggy hillside. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, the resting place of America's honored dead. And to this day, his grave there is one of the most visited of all, second only to the grave of a president. People still come, year after year, to stand quietly before the simple white headstone of the small Texas boy who became a giant. So what do we take from the life of Audie Murphy? It is tempting to make him into a cartoon, a superhuman who single-handedly won battles. But the truth is richer and sadder and more human than that. Here was a boy who had every reason to amount to nothing, poor, orphaned, undersized, uneducated, rejected again and again. And through some combination of hard circumstance, natural gift, and sheer refusal to quit, he became one of the bravest soldiers his country ever produced. His memoir, To Hell and Back, and the official record of his Medal of Honor citation, and the work of biographers like Don Graham, all tell the same essential story, of a man who was extraordinary in war and deeply wounded by it. He proved that courage is not about size, or background, or how you look. And then, in his long struggle afterward, he proved something even more important, that the strongest men are the ones honest enough to admit that they too can be broken, and brave enough to ask for the wounds inside to be seen. You are standing on top of a tank that is on fire in a snowy field in France, a machine gun in your hands and a field telephone at your ear, wounded, alone, with an entire enemy assault coming toward you through the white haze. You are 19 years old, and you are the boy the recruiters laughed at, the skinny orphan from a cotton field in Texas who was told, over and over, that he was too small to matter. You cannot know, in this burning hour, that you will survive this day, that you will wear more medals than any American soldier of this war, that you will see your own face on a movie screen, playing your own life. And you cannot know that the hardest battle is still ahead of you, and that it will be fought not in the snow, but in the dark of sleepless nights for the rest of your life. All you know right now is that your men are behind you in those trees, and that as long as you can stand and pull this trigger, the enemy will not get past you. So you hold the line. Because that, in the end, is the only thing a soldier like you was ever going to do.